Yeah, thank everybody for joining us. And we're just a couple of days away from Rosh Hashanah. We've been talking about it. It's something that it's been on our mind. And literally, today's Wednesday, just a couple of days away. So we're going to talk about tzitzis, the mitzvah of tzitzis that's in the Shema. So one of the paragraphs of the Shema is the paragraph of tzitzis. Right? And we say, and God said, Moshe, Dabar b'nei Yisrael, lehem, tell them, vasu lehem tzitzis, and make yourself a garment with tzitzis. So what is the significance of the mitzvah of tzitzis in the Shema? It's a beautiful mitzvah. We don't have the mitzvah of, I don't know, giving charity in the Shema. We don't have the mitzvah of eating kosher, in the Shema. There's a lot of mitzvahs. So we spoke about the significance of the tefillin and the mezuzah. And the question is, what's the significance of the tzitzis? And this will dig a little deep into this mitzvah, the importance of this mitzvah. So the commentaries explain that the word of Samson Falher says something very interesting. Samson Falher says that the word tzitzis comes from tzitz, which is the word of like a flower. Right, so he says tzitz hasadeh, the flower, right, that sprouts from the ground. So why does tzitzis come from that word of flower, of tzitz hasadeh, the flower that comes from the ground? What's this? What's the connection? Commentaries explain that the connection is that the idea, again, there's many layers upon layers of reasons why we do mitzvot. But says of Samson Falher, one of the reasons why we have the mitzvah of tzitzis is to sort of connect to that what Adam and Eve recognized that they were naked, right? When they ate from the Eitz Hadas, from the tree of knowledge, they recognized, one of the things says, Yodu ki arum mimhem, they recognized that they were not clothed. And what happens? They went and they covered themselves with like leaf branches and things, and then it says God created for them clothing, right? God created for them different clothing. So says the commentaries that the concept of clothing, right, is to make us realize that we are not animals. Right? One of the knowledges, first thing they recognized was they were naked. It means to say that the knowledge that they received, right, was the recognition, right, that their body, right, has desires to it, has an animal component to it, right? Our physical bodies have sort of that. People say we want to be raw, we want to be, that's not a Torah way. That's not a way of acting, to realize that you have a higher calling, right? That's part of the concept of that God made for them a clothing, right? He created for them garments, right? That we realize that man is most min behema. Man is greater than an animal. We have animal instincts. Right? We have our physical and desires and things. We all have it. But the idea of clothing is to sort of build yourself up, right? You wear a good, nice clothes, you feel a little better. You wear a certain type of clothes, you feel a certain way. That's the concept of uniforms. You're associated with certain things. Clothing design creates you in a certain way. It shouldn't take away your internal self of who you are. It shouldn't be your clothes, but your clothes help you develop of who you are. That's why there's just dress codes, right? Certain places you have to dress a certain way, and other places don't allow you to dress a certain way because they want to create a certain atmosphere. It'll be too of a rigid atmosphere, right? It'll be an atmosphere that's too confining. They want a more loose atmosphere, so they get rid of some of the clothes, or they only allow certain types of clothes, because that's what clothing does. Clothing creates an environment of the person, of how you are, right? And you can be the most wildest person when you're wearing a suit and tie, right? You're wearing nice clothes. You're wearing clothes that you act in a certain way. Yeah, then you rip it off and you put it on. You put on a t-shirt. You put on a loud shirt or whatever it is, a Hawaiian shirt. Right? It's called Hawaiian shirt. It's a certain atmosphere. It creates a certain thing. So therefore, says the commentary, that is really, says the Samson and Paul Hirsch, that's really the depth of what it means that they recognized that they were naked, that they weren't clothed. It means to say they recognized that they're only their animal component to them. They realize now that they have a higher calling. They realize now that there's something more lofty that they could connect with, but they realize that their body language, they realized their relationship of themselves to their neshama was not working together, and that's what it means nakedness. That's a concept of nakedness. And therefore, they cover themselves right away as they can, and God gave them a gift and gave them clothing. Says Rav Samson Falhurst, that's the concept of tzitzis. Tzitzis, as we said, is a flower with sprouts. Means to say that it's the beginning of us realizing and reflecting. We wear the tzitzis is on our clothes, right? So what's a tzitzis made of? It's a garment of 4 corners, and you have the strings that are attached to it on the corner. How it is, 1 hole, 2 holes, differences of different opinions, but everybody agrees, right? It's 4 strings that are turned into 8, and those strings, right, represent, right, the mitzvah of Tzizis, and we have it on 4 corners. Yeah, in the days of when we had chelas, right, the special blue dye, one of the strings was chelas, and that's brought down in the Torah. But the Tzizis are there to remind us that we have a higher calling. Our clothes should represent the higher calling. Our physical body should represent the high calling. Therefore, it's on our garments. And the mitzvah is only on a 4-corner garment. Why? It's a good question. There is a concept of 4 corners representing the 4 corners of the earth, right? That's the idea of the 4 corners, right? If it's round, it's not the 4 corners of the earth. If we say our world is round, it's not really 4 corners. It's a metaphor. I mean to say that wherever we are, we could relate and connect to God. There's the idea that the strings with all the knots add up to 613, and reminding us of the mitzvahs. That's the concept why there's tchelas, right? To remind us to look up in the sky, to remind ourselves that there's God and there's a higher calling. But this whole thing is on our clothes. And there's a lot to talk about tzitzis, and we're going to keep the class short today, right? Rosh Hashanah has a lot to do, right? But I want to primarily talk about this concept of a higher calling, of identifying oneself with a higher calling. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to identify myself in any certain way. I don't want to betray, be one way and act another way. I want to be, just let myself go. And I hear it, trust me. And I'm much more comfortable in a polo shirt, and I'm much more comfortable. And when I get home, I dress down, I change. Sundays, wear polo shirts. If I'm not, but there's a concept of dressing in a certain way, because not that you are your clothes. God forbid, one should never be their clothes. And that's something we have to emphasize. People feel they're their clothes. They have to get a certain brand. They have to get a certain this. And it's not saying not to. But you're not your clothes. But your clothes, the way you dress, helps you to define who you are. It's a big difference. Big difference. You know, sometimes people think that they could run away, or they could act in certain ways. They hide things. They wear caps, so they're this and that. And I'm not against it, right? Sometimes it's good, anti-Semitism or whatever, or just chill. But you should never do or dress in a certain way, because that allows you now not to be as strict on your religion or Judaism or whatever it is, or how you act. Because look, I'm dressed in a certain way, I could cuss. I'm dressed in a certain way, I could not be respectful. And no one's going to turn there. It's going to say, oh, that's those people. And that might not recognize me. Or that's the concept, that's the idea. The way we dress keeps us in check of how we act. Rarely do you see someone that's dressed properly acting in a disgusting way. They might be behind closed doors. They might have other problems that they have. They might do white lies and they might cheat certain ways. I'm not disagreeing. We have to be very careful of how we dress. Very careful how we dress. And therefore, it says the commentaries that this chapter of Tzitzis has 5 main things, 5 core concepts that we have to reflect on all the time, connected in the parts of Tzitzis. 1 is the Exodus of Egypt. Right? It says in the end, right? I took you out of Egypt. Next is the remembrance of Tzitzis. Right? We say to look at the Tzitzis. Right? It says we shouldn't be influenced. You shouldn't be influenced by your eyes and by your heart. Right? Don't be influenced in our beliefs, in our actions, and what we do. Right? And we spoke about that in the past. That's also why right? Our eyes are the keys to our soul. We spoke about that. And then number 5, the thoughts of idol worshiping. And we've explained many times that idol worshiping in our days, we don't have idol worshiping. Idol worshiping in our days could be idolizing false gods, not necessarily gods that you think have godly powers, but idolizing false people that are not good role models. Idolizing certain things that are not helpful for our children and for us, certain philosophies, certain ideals, certain norms, certain way society is. We have to think about that. That's also a form of idol worshiping. So we say, right? That you are going after. We have to realize that this is applicable to us also. Each one of us on our own level, but it's applicable to us in our stage of life and what we're doing. We have to be very careful of who do we idolize and who do we make sure our kids know who we idolize. There's nothing wrong with enjoying something, but you don't have to idolize that. You idolize an amusement park? I enjoy going to an amusement park. You idolize ice cream? I enjoy eating ice cream. I don't idolize it. I don't look like, whoa, so cool. I wish I could be next to them. What they say is so important. That's not who that shouldn't be the people or the things that we idolize, certain philosophies and certain ways of life and certain cultural things. We have to disconnect of something that you enjoy, which is within kosher, of course, within Jewish, that it's okay. I mean, kosher, doing it in certain ways. You could enjoy it, and it could be entertaining, but that shouldn't be something that you or someone that you should idolize. That's part of avodah zarah. Not the punishment of the avodah zarah the Torah is talking about, but the idea, the tom of the mitzvah, the reason behind the mitzvah. That's something that we all have to think about. And that's all in Mitzvah of Tzizis. You know why? Because all these things are things that will help us develop who we are. And as we said, Mitzvah of Tzizis is when we look at our tzitzis, when we realize we put something on our clothing, we say that the way we act externally, the way we do things externally, what we say externally affects us internally. So if someone is willing to say a certain thing or act in a certain way because he really enjoys something, but it's against what the Torah wants, or it's against what it hurts other people, or so then what you're doing really is you're allowing your fun and to become your ideals. That's not the way we are. That's the Mitzvah of Tzizis. We look at it, we say, no, we always have to make sure we connect to our Father in heaven. Always make sure that it's working within the Torah. And there's two separate things. We could enjoy something that's working in the Torah, but the philosophy of that thing is not right. So don't idolize it. And this is all so important to think about before we go into Rosh Hashanah. When we're ready to build or reconnect and re-inaugurate God as our King, we have to think about this again. Where is our North Star? What is driving what's important to us? What are we willing to sacrifice for what's really right and wrong? What's our North Star? Something we have to reflect on, and I try to do it all the time. I fail sometimes. We're all humans. Inside Baruch Left, it's not a righteous person one that doesn't sin. Something that we have to reflect on, something we have to think about. So I'm just going to leave us with these thoughts, something to reflect on. What's really the ideals that we want to give over to our kids, that we want to believe in? And just because it's something fun and something you enjoy, when it's fun and you enjoy it, there's nothing wrong with it. But if that thing then turns into something that you idolize and something that is controlling your schedule and something that is controlling how you act and what you do, then that turns into avodah zarah. It turns into idol worshiping. Just like the clothes you wear. So that's something that is an important thing to reflect on over Rosh Hashanah, over these days, to make sure that our North Star, make sure that the things that we idolize, make sure the things that we believe in are in accordance with the Torah, are in accordance with our spiritual growth, are in accordance with what we believe in, what we think is right. And hopefully, if we constantly reflect and think about our actions and how we're doing things and make sure that they fit with the Torah and our ideals. When we look at the tzitzis and we say, hey, we realize that the clothing that we wear are to remind us that we're something more than an animal, something more than whatever, then hopefully we'll have a better judgment and we'll keep on growing and changing. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'm going to stop the